Well, let's get another question here, Jim. This one sent to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Mike in Derbyshire, England. He says a lot of thanks here for the shows over the past year with the pandemic. We appreciate those kind words. In terms of my question, I discovered wrestling in the early 90s, although we could only get WWF at the time in the UK. I came into it around the time Jake Roberts and Randy Savage did their Cobra angle together, and was very quickly a big Macho Man fan. And even today, he and Bret Hart are arguably my favorite wrestlers. I do wonder, though, whether a prime years Randy Savage was a man of his time, or whether he'd had got over to the same kind of extent in any era, including today.
Oh, God. If Savage would have gotten over any time, maybe, I don't know, in the 40s, he would have probably been locked up somewhere. But just because society changed quite a bit, they probably would have said, what the fuck is this guy? He's on drugs of some description. But no, Savage, he was an incredible worker. He not just doing the moves, but he understood he could do shit that looked good, but he was also safe. He could work. He was cutting edge in some cases as far as his athleticism when he was 6 feet tall and 220 something or 30 pounds and ripped and still doing the fucking double sledge axe handle off the top to the floor. And, you know, as a matter of fact, he was a better in-ring wrestler the times when, you know, before anybody actually saw him in the WWF. But I mean, by that point, he had the promo and the gimmick and, you know, his style down, and he was a much more well-rounded personality and a main event money drawing guy. But you want to talk about fucking tearing the house down in the ring, those ICW matches where nobody ever saw him were fucking great. And the matches he had working for Nick Goulas with Bobby Eaton, they did a 90-minute Broadway at least once, maybe a couple of times. They did some 60s for the Mid-America title. And that's where Bobby and Savage stole shit from each other, you know, because both guys could do all that top rope shit. And whereas Savage nobody could ever get Bobby Eaton's knee, right? Nobody could ever do the knee drop. Savage couldn't do it. Nobody could do it. But Bobby used to tell me he used to try to do that thing that fucking Savage did where he would grab the guy by the head and run across the ring and jump over the top rope and spring the guy's neck on the rope, and he couldn't fucking get it. But they were, you know, he said they had great matches because they'd push each other. Nobody ever saw those. Nothing's on tape. But I think Savage, between the promo and the physique and the personality and the fact that not only could he work performing moves, but he could work mentally because he'd grown up in the wrestling business and, you know, second generation, he could have been a star in any territory. The reason why that it took so long was just because Angelo they were running Outlaw. So it took until if they hadn't decided to run their own company and then join up with Roop and Orton and those guys, you know, when they split off from Knoxville, then I'm sure Savage would have probably gone from Nashville working for Nick, probably over to Memphis to work for Jarrett, or maybe to Detroit for the Sheik because Nick and Sheik were close. And then he would have worked other territories. But since they started running ICW in early 1979 and didn't close it up until late 83, one of the best wrestlers in the world was Randy Savage, who was literally being seen by almost nobody. And the only reason he got hired then, we talked about it earlier in the show, was when they had to close down. They just couldn't run any farther. And that's when Angelo made the plea, hey, let's make money out of it. And Jarrett agreed to bring Savage in to work with Lawler. And from there, Jimmy Hart went first. And I've always heard this story. One of the stories was from Jimmy himself, but some people have other tellings of it. But I always heard that Jimmy volunteered that goddamn Randy Savage is one of the best wrestlers in the world, and he's down there in Memphis. Well, let's call him. And that's how they got Savage. So Savage literally went from being basically a prelim guy starting out, having a run on top for Nick Goulas, working as his own family's outlaw company champion for 4 years, a little run in Memphis, and straight to the WWF. That's just the way it happened. But he would have been a star anywhere. He could do everything.
You got to think he would have fit in today just because he was, in a lot of ways, a trendsetter, because he didn't really like calling his matches in the ring eventually. He just wanted to script everything out and plan out the matches.
Yeah.
Which is somewhat akin to what guys do today, where they plan out the entire match in the back.
But at the same point, he got him to go along with it because he was a big star in the big company. If he'd have been in the territories, I don't know if everybody would have gone along with that, but he could still do it the other way. I think the biggest problem would have probably the time that he spent working for his dad and them running their own company. They were outlaws in every sense of the word. And then most of the guys working there had some kind of personal habit at the time that would have been frowned upon in some of the other territories in one way or another. And, they got by with it. And, he probably would have had trouble with Bill Watts's, how can I say this? His strictness, his rules, and et cetera, in a territory like that. Because Savage was high strung. I never spent much time around him. I only got a chance to, I met him a few times, and then during the period of time where we coexisted in the WWF briefly in that 93, 94 period till he left when I just come in. But he was definitely highly strung and, had the ability to snap in certain circumstances. And that probably would have been exacerbated in a place like Mid-South or Calgary or anything like that. So who knows how it would have turned out. But on talent, he could have been a star in any territory.